next we're going to have Carla Rodríguez Estévez telling us a bit about how they implemented this Elixir-powered low-income animal shelter support. So.
Okay, thank you very much for being here. I'll be presenting a personal experience while developing a web application to help be a support for animal shelters. And as a matter of context, this will be all in Spanish context. I mean, there are some things that might be subject to the fact that this is a Spanish animal shelter, so maybe in your country differs, but this is the context. So, first of all, I would like to introduce the universe of the problem. For the people that don't know, animal shelters basically have the task to take care of stray animals in a certain area. Usually there are local areas, really small cities, villages, and the money that they have, the funds that they have is really limited, and they have usually in Spain a lot of animals to take care of. They have a physical shelter, and sometimes they have people that collaborate with them to be foster people and foster owners. They need to take care a lot of different animals, and so that they need to track all the expenses of them. They need to have a lot of information related to different movements, and one of the more important things is that these organizations are run by volunteers and different people that may change a lot in a time. So coordinate all the movements, all the adoptions, all the animals is really difficult, and they have experienced a lot of challenge doing it. So the main objective of this project was trying to create a web solution to make them manage this task easier on their daily life, and of course, since they are volunteers, make everything as cheap as possible. So, as you can see, this is a real application that one of these organizations had. This is from Os Biosbardos, a shelter from Galicia, which I thank them for helping me during this development. Of course, what they want and what they try to achieve is having a properly managed shelter, have as much animals as possible, and try to find a proper owner for each one of them. These adoptions process are usually really complex, and they have to optimize the use of their money. This is a critical point that I will be repeating along this presentation. Of course, they also have problems with their infrastructures, and they have important limitations in terms of IT and knowledge of informatics. So, the proposed technical solution is something as you can see over there, an application that will unify all the operations that this organization may have, optimize their resources, having really high performance and high scalability thanks to Elixir, have something easy to maintain, something that will last a lot of time. They don't have the means to keep maintaining applications that are unsustainable. Improve their reach. They need to facilitate adoptions for people, and of course, cost-effective implementations. In this specific use case, this application was developed by one person in almost 3 months, not really 3 months, and the cost at the end will surprise you. So, first of all, we need to analyze the problem to really know what kind of software we can make. Of course, everything is going to be using Elixir and all the tools that this environment brings us. So, first of all, we need to analyze what kind of people will be using this application. Of course, people without any technical background, people that will either adopt or manage the shelter. So all the future, this is a summary table of all the functional requirements that through different interviews we could collect and analyze, and this will be the goal that we have for this development. And in terms of non-functional requirements, we have, of course, scalability, which BIM's process help us a lot to have a good scalability. Of course, fault tolerance is really important. We don't really will have someone. We won't have someone taking care of the application 24 hours. We can't rely on someone to take care of it. We need to think. We need to think about an application that will take care of itself, and an application that will grow in a good way. That if in the future needs a new feature, a new functionality, it will be easy to develop. And thanks to the modular design of Phoenix, we can achieve this. Of course, there are other problems that we'll have to face. We have more complex needs. Some of these functionalities are really difficult to track, really difficult to operate, and we need to have this in mind. We need to have a very complete application. We need to do everything that we can to try to have all needs met. The evolution is also a problem if we don't have this in mind. We need to have everything that the user may need. So through the development, Elixir helped us a lot. We decided to have an MVC architecture following the Phoenix suggested architecture, which will facilitate us and make our work easier. The code organization is easier this way. We have everything separated and well organized. And in terms of difficulty, MVC architecture is easy to understand for future developers and people that will be in touch with this code. In terms of fault tolerance and high availability, Elixir and Phoenix give us automatic monitoring and recovery of isolated processes. We have retry mechanisms and failure event handling, and this will help us a lot if something happens in production. Also, scalability is really easy to distribute the load of the application. We can escalate the application horizontally and vertically. And Elixir's concurrency model allows the system resources to be used more effectively, which is really important in this case. Also, if we have a cluster, it's easier to manage. So, one really important thing that I will highlight during the process of development is the generation of code. The fact that we have the possibility to generate code and boilerplates depending on the functionality that we are developing is really important. That made the development more agile, and of course made the development faster and easier. As well as code, we have already testing tools and different test suites with this code, and also we can have documentation added with this. As I explained before, we have an MVC, a model view controller architecture, and in terms of the view part, we made the decision to have two different views. One, a live view, which is quite popular in Phoenix applications, and an additional API REST. So basically, we wanted to have a live view because in terms of user experience, the possibility of having real-time events, real-time changes made a more interesting experience for the user. And when you are looking at a catalog and you are trying to watch all the animals, it's really interesting being all the changes at the moment. If you are tracking the expenses as well, it's really important if we have, for example, another tool that will be tracking all the data that is coming and going. So it's interesting and something that is always a positive point. No JavaScript, so we have everything using the same language, we don't need to have a backend and a front end with different languages. We can be just one developer and do the full stack with no problems without ending up in a manicomnium, so it's quite nice. And also, we decided to have an API thinking about the future, just in case. Usually, this is not a good idea, thinking of what if. Just, it was interesting if, for example, they wanted to have a mobile app, or if they wanted to integrate their system with others, of whatever possibility, they just don't like the interface and they want to have React, Angular, or whatever kind of front end. They can still use this as a backend and not having to migrate everything, which is always a positive point to maintain that information. And of course, we have the same tools we have to generate the live views, we have to generate the API. So the creation of this API was almost, was not difficult at all. So in terms of quality assurance, if we want to create a really robust application, we need to ensure that the quality will be at least decent, if not as perfect as we like. So first of all, testing with Elixir is really easy. We have all the testing types that we wanted. We have unit testing with XUnit. To test the live views, we can have a library to test even the smallest click on the application. And we can have almost every part of our application test. We can have the documentation also to future developers. They have all the information they need on the code and they don't need to go back to the original developer. And it is easy to navigate since it can create an HTML, sorry. And of course, we can have tools as Credo, the Elixir, whatever to analyze the code for us. Well, also Hex to ensure all the dependencies. In terms of code evolution, well, Elixir allow us to have hot code upgrades. Well, as I explained, the architecture itself is easier to maintain, is well separated. The generated code made with Phoenix already separates everything coherently, so that is already ensured. We have two monitoring libraries as telemetry and have our metrics to ensure that everything is running fine in our application. And also, but well, last but not least, we have a large number of forums, tutorials, books, information, documentation, and a big community that make our life easier in case there are problems. We want to use some libraries that we have it, so this part is really important. Deployment. So an important part of this work was the deploy. The work is not, the application is not finished if it's not deployed. So we needed to find a platform to deploy this and, of course, make it as cheap as possible. There are a lot of different options. They are as expensive as you want it. So, of course, we needed something, if it's possible, free, easy to use, and that will not change a lot in the future because the final result that we wanted was an application and not touch it anymore, or at least not us. That it will be in hands of others. So always try to make the life of other people easier. In this case, we decided to choose Elixir. The free tier is enough for us. We've tested. With one account, we have everything we need. We have an easy-to-use monitoring panel. We don't need a lot of configurations. It's already built for this kind of applications. It's like the go-to if you have a Phoenix application. So that's quite nice. And basically, if you are not really familiar with this tool, it's quite similar to others, but simpler. So, of course, there were others that we thought it would be interesting to use. However, this is a table as a small resume of all the points that we wanted to have, which one merit and which one no. So, some final thoughts on this work. Well, the project overview. Through this journey, in less than 3 months, we could create this application. All the functional requirements were met. The final user gives its approve, even though it's not in production or is not being used by them at this moment. The cost is free, basically, as long as we keep using Elixir with this account, there will be no problem. And as far as I know, Elixir has no plans to make them expensive or retire this tier. And of course, there are some future enhancements that we would like to do. For example, in terms of design, that due to the budget and the limited time, I'm not a designer, but maybe if a designer could help with this in terms of UX, UI, it will be interesting to look at this and try to recreate some parts in a more stylish way. And of course, see how this goes long time. Like sometimes until you use the program, you don't even know if you really need some specific part. If some part is more complicated than you thought. So these are the points that maybe in this moment that not a lot of time has passed, we would like to cover. So. Thank you very much for your attention.
Any questions?
So everything worked out fine, right? But what were the problems? I mean, you have experience with using Unix now and database integration or whatever. What were the problem points? Were there any?
The main problem, at least I was the developer that did this in less than 3 months. The first problem, it was the time. I always think that the worst problem of every software product is the time. So in this case, my resources in terms of if I had a problem with one module, if I needed more information, I didn't have a lot of resources. I had to read a lot of books, which nowadays is quite interesting, having Google, having ChatGPT. There are a lot of resources, but when you have to go all of them in 3 months, you start having a lot of problems in the middle. You cannot contrast some solutions. So, and well, maybe this is important, but my personal profile at that moment was a junior developer. So maybe a more complex or more different group of developers. Of course, one person is not a group. It's really important to have different eyes watching one code, another. And at the first time, I kind of wanted to test how the performance were, and I did a small load test that is described on the paper. And even at that moment, the results surprised me. I was like, oh, this was quite nice, and I don't have a lot of intelligence to do this in other languages. So, yeah, maybe for me and for new developers, the biggest problem is trying to make something so complete, because at the end, even if the steps were simple, the final product was kind of complex. It is difficult to really know what to look forward and how to document it yourself. Thank you.
What was the initial application written in? I mean, in which language? So what are you replacing, basically?
The initial application, I tried to speak with different volunteers. They didn't know what they had something. They didn't know how was it implemented. So it was really difficult. I had to do inverse engineering. So that part was also really interesting to do. And I think it was just a blogspot for the people that were seeing, and their internal operations were one Excel page, basically, like animal 1, animal 2, one photo, in case they don't know them by their names, and all the veterinary documentation, if they were castrated or not, all that. So it was kind of messy. They had like page one copied. So it was really disorganized, everything.
Great, thanks.
Thank you. Do you know actually how many thousand lines of code you wrote?
I have the exact number in the paper, and now I cannot ensure you the number, sorry.
Okay. And total time?
Total time? During 3 months, Monday to Friday, 3 hours per day, approximately. Because I had a full-time job, I couldn't use that many time.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much.